Well, welcome to the Seraphine Podcast. As you know, I'm Seraphine Arocha, and today we are so lucky to have the beautiful and knowledgeable Dr. Abby Reed. Welcome.
Hi, lovely souls. Thank you for having me.
I am so glad that you are able to do the podcast. I know that you're a busy woman. I know that a lot of people have spoken to me about what you have done for them. And your reputation just is stellar. I mean, it is just stellar.
Thank you.
One of them who I've had on, everyone knows him by the Dapper Latino. He is, Joshua just came in and he just spoke to just the gift that you have and how scared he was with the Bell's palsy. And I think to start out this conversation, I'd like to know how you began your journey into Eastern medicine.
Oh, that's a good question. And I love Josh. So this will be a fun evolution story to tell you. So I started out, my degree is poli-sci and international studies from KU. Nothing to do with what I'm doing now. But I was a Social Security disability advocate for 5 years at a firm, and I worked for veterans and people that had chronic pain, and there was just no end in sight. And that was back in 2007, 2008. And a lot of them were on opioids and just really felt hopeless. And at the same time that I was working for this attorney, his wife was into holistic medicine. They had adopted a baby with autism. I had no clue about holistic medicine, but it just opened Pandora's box for me. And so I just started reading at night and was just so fascinated with it. And I really felt like there was a lot of truth in this medicine and in traditional Chinese medicine. I was planning on going to law school, had the LSAT scheduled. And by that time, I had moved on to a law firm in downtown KC here. And one morning I woke up and I was like, I'm going to massage school. And my parents at the time were like, what the hell are you doing? You know, you've just spent about the last 6 years, planning on becoming an attorney, and you woke up and you are supposed to go to massage school. But it was just like this divine assignment that just came through, and it was in my early 20s. So I was working at the firm, going to massage school at night, and there was a traditional Chinese medicine class, like an acupressure class during that time. And I was so in love. And so, I mean, you can continue your education. You can either go to full-blown acupuncture school, or you can become a DO, DC, or MD, and you can do your fellowship to become an acupuncturist. So, after massage school, I opened my own studio, and it was a massage studio. It was in the back of a tanning salon, like circa 2010.
Yeah.
And again, I had never been adjusted. I grew up, we were put on antibiotics, and that was just kind of what we did. And so my clients at the time were getting better faster with a chiropractor. And, again, I just started reading, and it made so much sense that your nervous system is the master controller of everything in your body, all different processes. And without interference, you do induce healing in the body. And again, I found out that you can do your fellowship with acupuncture simultaneously. So I decided to get my biology prereqs and my degree and went back to school at 25.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And chiropractic school total with the biology prereqs was 5 years. But with the fellowship, you do that on the weekends. And you start out with a 100-hour fellowship, and then you can do 200-hour, and then you can get your diplomat. So it was an 11-year process,
Wow.
Total to become, a licensed doctor and acupuncturist, but graduated right before my 30th birthday, and I was like, let's get busy.
Yeah.
So that was the genesis, the beginning of that, but there's definitely been an evolution since then to get into more of the cosmetic.
It's so cool to learn about it. So to go back just a bit, so I have always been so shy of acupuncture. Or not acupuncture, sorry. I love acupuncture.
Yeah.
It's actually chiropractic.
Yes.
The crunching of the bones. I've heard horror stories about my neck, or I have to keep going. It's more of creating a problem. So could you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. My pleasure. It's so funny because I had the same opinion. I shadowed a chiropractor when I was 18, and I watched a cervical adjustment, and again, I said, hell no. Like, I was just, I wasn't ready for it.
Yeah.
And so after I did my research and with school, it took me 2 years to finally let you have a student clinic where you let interns work on you. It took me 2 years to finally let them adjust my neck because I was not raised with this. Yeah. But, you dissect bodies in chiropractic school and you dig into research and literature. And I kept finding more and more evidence that supported that, this is safe. This is safe. And it's interesting. I've had an interesting journey with chiropractic because, again, at the beginning I thought, oh, this is a little barbaric, but it's anti-aging medicine. When your body is moving, you have synovial fluid around the joints that keeps you upright. It keeps your posture upright. And your brain is able to, communicate via your spinal cord, via spinal nerves to your organs. So your organs are able to function at a level that they're optimized. When your spine's out of alignment, it's like a power line is down and you're getting reduced nerve signal to that organ. And so everything's about flow. With yoga, it goes kind of very similar hand in hand. But what I've seen and, what I tell my patients is, a lot of people associate chiropractic with pain, but it is truly anti-aging medicine. I see people that have, totally transformed with the medicine. They sleep better, they're happier, they feel better. Right out of chiropractic school, I went to an activator only clinic. And so it's a spring-loaded tool. There's no rotation with the cervical spine. And, it was a large geriatric population of Medicare patients. And, it's just, I feel like it's a wonderful technique if you're not comfortable with having the rotary moves of the neck. But with my new practice here at Sacred, I just integrate. So if, whatever your body needs and whatever you're comfortable for, it's just the message is you don't have to be in pain. You don't have to suffer. And I want everyone to be a hot 85-year-old hiking and kayaking. That's like my goal. I say on day one, like, what is your greatest dream of the version of yourself that you hope to be? Yeah. And I truly believe with that medicine that you can achieve that. So
do you ever combine a session of a chiropractic session with acupuncture?
I do. So it's called The Ritual. Uh-huh. It's an 80-minute treatment. So we do, based on what they prefer, if they like to just zen out at the beginning and then do their adjustment. That's really nice to have that because their muscles are completely relaxed after acupuncture. Yeah. So, it just depends on the patient. But, yeah, that's probably one of our most popular treatments now. People just like to maximize their self-care time.
So for our audience who may not be as well versed in acupuncture, could you describe the differences with acupuncture and being adjusted?
Absolutely, yeah. So, being adjusted is spine-based and extremity-based, and we do some soft tissue, and acupuncture is energetic-based. So, chiropractic is biomechanical, about just how your body is functioning, and acupuncture is more of the bioenergetic aspect of healing, which again, no one told me that energy medicine was important growing up. That's been an evolution, and fortunately there is research that validates this now, where mainstream medicine has really gotten on board that this medicine does work. But it's the oldest form of medicine. It's 5,000 years old. Yeah. Chinese doctors observed patterns with people, and it was reserved for the emperor, so it was kind of this secret medicine, and there were barefoot doctors in China that started to leak this information to everyone. And so there are over 2,000 points in the body. Mm-hmm. They lie along 12 meridians, which are rivers, I call them, or I compare them to river pathways. And the big takeaway is chi, so life force energy that runs through our bodies. And, if you know what chi is, if you observe someone that's sick versus someone that's just ran a 5K, that vitality difference, that's when healthy chi is flowing. Yeah. And so everything is about flow. And it goes really hand in hand with chiropractic because, again, it's about flow and getting that energetic system balanced again. But yeah, there is auricular therapy, which is ear-based, and some acupuncturists will only needle the ears. And then there's also body acupuncture, which I do a mix of both. It just creates a circuit in the body. So, I mean, we are energetic beings. I mean, at the cellular level, you are a proton, neutron, and electron. So, I mean, it's getting that system balanced.
I love it. I first started in New York, and I went to one of my students when I was teaching at S Factor. She was this Chinese gal who's like, hey, I think, my body was in pain because I had a dance background. She's like, you know what, let me give you this experience. And I remember the first time she just went for it. I think, and it was crazy because it wasn't like when I revisited it with you, you were more conservative with the needles. And I was anticipating my first experience was she just went to town on my body. And then the cupping, I loved the cupping.
Yes.
And it's so interesting because, again, I get teased a lot because when I am a fan of something, I am a fan of something.
Yes, I love
and
that.
then I look and see who else is a fan of it, and who's doing it. And I always find myself kind of in this same kind of grouping of what I call the celebutantes who are into new age stuff. So like Gwyneth Paltrow was one of the first ones where she really kind of brought it into mainstream with Goop. And I love her. She just brings it. She has a conversation. She doesn't sit there and go, it's Bible, because not all medicine works for everyone.
Right. Absolutely.
But she made it to where we can have some conversations about it, and we don't, I think there's a fine line too of like, obviously we don't want to steal from cultures in a way that isn't honoring it. But when you have studied it, when you know it through and through and can honor where its roots come from, and you're performing the act or the actual dispensing of the medicine, to me, when you're with someone who's just like, oh yeah, I learned it last weekend, versus someone who's like, this is my life's work.
Yes.
So in your journey in this, have you had moments where you were in a training or you were in a group collectively where you had to sit there and pause and go, are you really honoring the tradition of where it came from, the history of it?
That's really good. That's a good question. I would say really like from my first moment with it, it was with, my training was with Dr. Richard Yenny, who he brought it from the source. I mean, and I know we've discussed this, but he was a translator in World War II and was in the hospitals, in the Japanese hospitals, and he would see them being treated with this. And it was very not well known in the United States and not practiced. And Nixon went over to Japan, over in the 70s, and that really started to open up the dialogue and the conversation with, just that this medicine is truth. And so we really learned the philosophy early on, and like you said, just to honor where it comes from, that there's such wisdom, that the body is truly whole and its holistic flow, and just about living with the seasons, and that there is an innate intelligence within each of us that can heal if you give it the right tools. Yeah.
I'm curious too, because now, with on Netflix, the In Goop Health, and then Unwell, these are all of kind of dismantling the mystique of like these things that people were always like, oh, it's Hulu voodoo. What is it?
Yes.
And some of it's super positive. Some of it is a little scary.
Yes.
And my husband and I, we've been in therapy for nearly 2 years now. And we've had a lot of discussions about trauma in our bodies. We've talked a lot about how we process, how I'm pretty much an open vessel. My husband is a little bit harder.
Yeah.
And we watched a few of the episodes. One of the first times I ever was introduced to ayahuasca was through Chelsea Handler.
Yes. Yeah.
And Chelsea does drugs.
Yes.
And I have to say, Chelsea Handler, you are so brave and so cool, and just unapologetic. And thank you for doing that episode, because I watched it at a time when I got diagnosed with adult ADHD, and I was really trying to understand the chemical makeup of my body, but also trying to understand my psychology, and really understanding that the body is right. It's these energy lines and pinging, and there's trauma, and there's things that are stuck inside, and it's so important to honor your body's history.
Absolutely.
So that when you move into the future, that it is healthier. So we were curious about ayahuasca. And I started to really dig into it. I started to read about it. And I also am highly sensitive to cultural appropriation. So I read about, well, I want to do the real deal. I want to go, and I want to be out of the United States. I want to do it to where I'm experiencing it. And then the more I read, it was about the shaman actually taking the medicine. And the people just being an observation of it, and people not really understanding the capacity of their own, the limits, what they could handle. And then also there's a flip side to it that I think as we brought it in and westernized it a bit, I do really appreciate the therapy side of it and the studying neurologically of what it does to your brain.
Absolutely.
Because I do believe that, the reason why we decided not to go is because there was a certain town, and actually one of the shamans was killed there because someone had a psychotic break and killed the shaman, and it was a white person. And it was just heartbreaking to me, because here they are sharing this very deep, beautiful, spiritually uplifting thing that's embedded in their culture. And then we white people go and they're like, I can handle that shit. I'm not going to deal with my trauma. I'm going to get high as fuck, and then I'm going to go murder the person who took me through the ceremony. So we paused, and then I started to see that there are actual scientists and doctors in California who are doing deep research with the neurology of the brain, and having psychiatrists with you as you take the medicine.
Absolutely.
Now, just a few weeks ago, I had a few guests on here, and they were amazing women. Sam and May, they're sweet women, and just so open about their journey with ayahuasca. And then there was definitely a very quick progression with it. So I'm very
interesting.
They did a lot over a short amount of time, and I've read studies. It's like, oh, you got to honor it. So I want to know from someone who, you're a doctor. You have done the work. You practice Eastern medicine, and you have researched it to where I trust you. I believe that you honor it. So you have actually done ayahuasca.
I have.
And I am so curious your thoughts and where you think Western medicine could benefit from it. And where you think we need to take pause and really honor where it comes from.
This is a big sacred question that you just asked me, and I am so ready for it. I have so much to say. So I need to backtrack a little bit, back to the body holding trauma. That really became aware when I was in massage school, when we would work on people having emotional releases, working on their low back. And I mean, that's where you store a lot of anger and a lot of pain. And then I was in yoga teacher training, and we had a trauma-informed class about you have to embody and you have to move to release trauma. I mean, you can talk all day long, but you need the embodied release, so with somatic experience therapist, I mean, that's a good way of releasing trauma. But, I think every setback in everyone's life is a teacher, and myself included. I experienced PTSD when I was 17, and I had some latent symptoms that came back in my early 30s that I just never dealt with. I never got help at the time, and then it all started to come up to the surface after I got out of chiropractic school. So I really went on a self-healing deep journey, and I feel like if you are in the healing space, I mean, that's your divine responsibility and assignment too, just to be able to hold space for people and to understand what they're going through. So I will tell you, I've been invited to 2 ayahuasca ceremonies over the past 2 years, and I declined. And the reason why, I mean, number one is my license. I mean, I thought, I'm a licensed practitioner, and I want to protect that.
Yeah.
Also privacy.
Yeah.
And like you, I thought I want to really go to Peru, where this medicine comes from the Amazon. Well, Denise Cooper is that answer for me. She lives in Peru. She's lived in Peru for the last 13 years. She has a retreat center with her husband that is Peruvian, but she's from Kansas City.
Very cool.
Yes,
I did not know that.
Yeah. So, she's been a conduit for me and a good place to learn. And she does have an ayahuasca retreat scheduled for December 1st. The borders are opening again in November. But, I did, finally, I was ready. I had done some very deep work. And I thought, you know what? This is the year. Like 2020 is about just like being in your authentic self, and it kept calling to me. And that's what people say is the medicine continues to call to you. You have to do it safe. You have to be smart about it. I mean, there is a purification preparation process. I mean, where you do not eat meat, you don't partake in caffeine or alcohol for at least 7 days prior to the ceremony. And that is the beginning of this medicine alone. I mean, because as 2020 has evolved, I mean, I found myself even like grabbing the glass of wine every single night. And I'm like, it feels good to like not reach for something or not want something outside of your body and to just be okay. And, coffee is up there as like the top 3 loves of my life, So, I mean, that alone was like some shadow work of like, why are you tired in the mornings, and it's more for me about the ritual of just being cozy. But that was, some good self-examination and got me kind of out of the numbness of what this year has been. But so the second part of the ceremony is the actual ceremony of what you experience. And then the third part is integration. So that's where you really take it in about like what you experience, what messages came through, and the responsible way to do it is with a therapist. And there are therapists now that are certified. There's one at Moss and Main here in Kansas City that will go through. And I mean, it's any kind of psychedelic. It's if you're going to do it in a medicinal way and in a responsible way, that would be absolutely what I would do. I mean, obviously, if you're going to do an ayahuasca retreat, research, read after page 5 of Google.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, there's several forums online about where to go and be safe, because you are in a hypnotic state and you can be taken advantage of if you don't truly trust the shaman. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I can elaborate a little bit on my experience, but it was a small women's circle, and it was all about reclaiming our power as women and healing any kind of past trauma. And it started like the healing from the first moment of saying, why am I here? Because it was just being completely open and honest. And it was such a non-judgmental space to just talk, while you're there. And then when I took the medicine, it was like a tsunami hit me. I mean, they say it takes about an hour and a half to kick in.
Did you have anxiety? Because I realize, I mean, I know that they try to give you as calming of surroundings when you begin it.
Yes.
But just the idea of drinking a liquid and having it go through you and knowing that it can be extremely gut-wrenching, literally, like up-chucking as well as going
purgative,
to them. It's both. That alone for people can just raise the anxiety through the charts.
Yeah.
Was there a moment where you were like the nerves got you?
Yeah. I would say no, because I was ready to release the anxiety that I had been suffering for before. Yeah, it was just like, I know what it feels like to suffer, and I'm ready to just surrender to this.
The group, I'm always curious too, because I'm very energy sensitive.
Yeah.
And some people are really good about like, you might be 10 feet away from me, but I can cut that energy off. Mm-hmm. So for me, I always envisioned people I'm super close to, a very intimate group, And I would not want it to be anyone that I wouldn't trust in
Yes.
observing me at my most vulnerable.
Yeah.
So you were with a women's group. How
Yeah.
big was this group?
It was a group total of 8.
All right.
Yeah.
So it was an intimate group. Did you know all of them ahead of time?
No, all complete strangers.
Did they establish an intimacy and trust in the beginning?
Yes, and that was with the Why Am I Here? And I mean, the first woman went, and it was like, oh my God, this is a vulnerable, safe space. And I had honestly never experienced that just with complete strangers. But everyone was really ready to heal and to up level and to just own, their journey and their experience and to step into this next level. But for me, it was total love. Yeah. And people say it's like 10 years of therapy in 5 hours. I mean, it was more like 32 years of therapy going back to age 4 for me.
Wow.
But every single significant relationship that I've had, good or bad, that person came through, and there was a conversation of just how much I love you and thank you and gratitude. And the people that have like hurt me that I've perceived in the past, it was like, oh, this was a soul contract. You were put on my path to bring me to my next level. And my soul chose this journey to expand and to learn and to help teach others going through what I did with you. And it was a total forgiveness. It was like that, the slate was wiped clean. Yeah.
That's so cool.
And, I got lots of self-care messages. After the experience, I wrote 10 pages of self-care, just how much that can go by the wayside when you take care of people, or if you're a mother, if you're nurturing, if you are, a boss babe, just how easy self-care can go out the window and how important it is.
What did you learn about yourself that you didn't know?
This is big. So the big overarching message was that it is time to step into my full queen energy, the mother energy, and we are all mothers in this world. And it was almost like the divine feminine truly activated in me. It was like the little girl in me, the maiden, she did her job. She explored, she was curious, she, sought, all the answers and the questions out there, but it's time. It was almost like an initiation into that more queen energy.
Yeah.
And that was for me really powerful.
Did you get a visit at all? I'm always interested because you use the word maiden, you use the word queen. And then there's usually, we can say grandmother, but we know that in the tarot, it's usually like a crone or it's a witch or it's this old woman. I like to think of it as the next pathway for my body just on the brink of the unknown. And being in that beautiful, beautiful place of, the vanity is gone, and I've lived all these years.
Yes.
And sharing the knowledge up until the very end. Were you visited by the quote unquote crone, which I don't even want that name. I want to say like it's like the divine mother.
Yeah. And that is the name for her right there. Yeah. She was Aya. It was like I was sitting down with her, and it was a definite, like, this sage wisdom. It's just, like you said, divine mother energy that I was sitting down with and just asking questions in this dialogue back and forth. Yeah.
It's so interesting because I have my entire life wanted to always portray youth on the outside.
Yes. Yes.
To a point to where it's a ritual for me in front of a mirror.
Same.
And, and I don't shy away from telling people that, I inject and I Botox and I do all of those things. But at the end of the day, I've started to really have these moments of realizing that it's okay when I see the lines on the face that are literally like the trails that I've traveled in my life. And it's like, why not wear them a little bit more with pride? And I think that's why I really gravitated towards you on our visit was you have you appreciate the outer beauty, but there's a real sense in the way you appreciate history, and you can tell that you are even honoring your own growth in the way that you speak to the person in the room. I didn't feel talked down to, but I also felt like a kid reading a book for the first time. But then you also spoke to me in a way that I could go on my 43 years and go, wait, I have learned a lot.
Yeah,
so the experience with you is really is very cool.
Thank you.
And I love that feeling.
Yeah.
Especially when you're doing something so sacred, which it is. It's your body. And I mean, it is energy work, and it's a vulnerability to be in that space with you.
Thank you so much for saying that.
Yeah.
You know, a teacher of mine, I was in Miami, in Little Havana, and we were walking the streets, and Afro-Cubana music was being played on a corner, and we walked up, and this woman, I mean, she had to be almost 90, no teeth, dancing, but the most beautiful, radiant woman I had ever seen, just because she was so in the moment and had just an inner glow that you just can't get with anything superficial. And that was a teacher for me that I thought, you know, when you're in alignment, when you take care of your heart and you are true and you do things that light you up, I mean, that exudes, you know, I mean, like the surface is just the byproduct, you know, but so that's what this work has really been centered around with sacred, and especially with the cosmetic acupuncture. That's really the philosophy.
How has let me rewind back. You had a pretty scary injury in your life to where you almost were, I mean, you were told that you probably couldn't practice.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that injury, and then if you can, maybe weave in a few things, just like I'm sure the ayahuasca ceremony had a profound effect in how it changed you as a doctor and as a caregiver to people. I'd like you to speak to that, the traumatic experiences strengthening your ability as a caregiver.
Yeah, I love that. So in 2017, I was on a trip with my husband and suffered an injury where I shattered my ulna, and I had never broken an arm, but I knew the moment that it happened that, okay, my life is going to change. And went to the ER, and 5 months later was able to practice again. But at the time, it was unknown if I would be able to go back. And they wanted to put a metal rod in my ulna, and I just said, give me 2 weeks. And at the time I was working at Sacred Chiropractic here in Kansas City, and it's called a multi-radiance laser. And this is just, everyone needs to know what a multi-radiance laser is. For knees, it's showing that it regenerates cartilage. It helps with fractures. It heals at the cellular level. So before you do anything more invasive, you should always try a cold laser. And within those 2 weeks, it did close the surgical gap. So that was a true miracle, a true blessing, along my path. And I did really struggle at the beginning because my whole identity was being a doctor, and I didn't know who I was outside of practicing. Mm-hmm. And that's when the spiritual journey began for me, of just truly like reconnecting and finding myself again outside of what I do. It's like, well, I know you do this, but who are you? And it was a remembering process, truly. Yeah. Which in chiropractic school, they do, the motto at least is that here at Cleveland, there's 11 schools in the United States, but it's very medical based, research based. I mean, they're wanting to be accepted as more mainstream type medicine. So the spiritual part of me was really forgotten. And as a kid, I would see auras, like I would feel energy. I'm a deep empath, but I forgot that part of me. Mm-hmm. And so it was like this reawakening process. And then that's when we began. It was called Haven at that time, which was a mobile acupuncture and yoga business, because I walked around with a hot pink cast. I could not adjust, but I could put needles in. And I have no clue how I did that with one arm. Yeah. But, I was bound and determined, to make the best of the situation. But it did. It led me on a reconnection with nature and getting out and even after a year after the injury, I was still weak in my body. And right before the injury, I mean, I was in the best physical shape of my life. I was working with a trainer, and it really was, like I said, a big identity crisis, but I needed to become the strongest version of myself. It was calling to me again, because it was even reflecting in my work that I wasn't stepping in. I had forgotten, and that injury really did set me back. So I decided to get into running. Yeah. And running was just a balm for me. It totally was a stress relief, and I was never a runner growing up. I mean, a mile was like my max, Yeah. I mean, I did couch to 5K back in 2012, and it was like I was Olympic shuffling, basically, like fast walking.
Yeah.
So, I remember that first run. It was a mile, and I was exhausted. Yeah. And a year later, ran almost 27 miles, up the tallest mountain in Wales. And so my message to people is like, it is almost like a slingshot. Like if you're being temporarily held back, like trust the divine whispers, because source always talks to you. And for me, it took an injury for me to finally get quiet. And you don't hear those divine messages unless you are just allowing space in your life. And that's where I think you get like the doors open, and you start to get the whispers of like, this is the next step. This is the next step. And that was that journey for me.
It's so interesting because I heard about you before I met you. Mm-hmm. And no matter how much I want to say that I'm someone who tries not to have an opinion or a preconceived notion of what someone's going to be like, I do every time. Yeah. So I just remember first, seeing your face, and then I was like, okay, and then being in the room with you, and all I can describe my initial reaction was that there is such a softness to you, but there's such a power. And I was curious, have you always been soft? I mean, you've got such a feminine kind of quality, but there's just this quiet strength underneath you. And I was wondering, have you always been this way? Mm-hmm. Or did I know my voice as a child was very loud. Mm-hmm. I was kind of a defiant kiddo. Mm-hmm. I was a little angry, and then I had some things happen that quieted my voice, but in a way that didn't. Again, softness doesn't mean weakness. It just means that the bravado of you're like, oh, I can actually hurt myself, and I can't trust the world around me all the time. Yeah. So it kind of pulled me back a little bit. Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, I felt like I was losing myself because of all the bad experiences, and I was trying to prove myself, whether it be in academics or whether it be through my body, whether it be through my relationships. And then all of a sudden, within just these last 5 years, I feel like that strength has come back up, but I enjoy that kind of quiet, like, balance. Yeah. And I was curious, where has it always been something about you that way? Take me through your journey on that. And then I'm also curious if you can remember, because I have like 50 million questions within this one. Yeah. You must be with a really incredible man, because there's always a yin to the yang. Yeah. And you have to have a grounding force, because I know my husband helped me find my voice again. So talk to me about, first, were you always this kind of soft, knowledgeable, strength woman, or did that change? And then talk to me about your relationship with your husband.
This is such a powerful question. Thank you for asking me. It was not always there. Yeah. No. After the injury, and, I think having the daily thing of, I want to become the strongest version of myself, and it's going to be painful, it's going to be ugly, it's going to be everything in between in that process. but just trusting, like having that highest version of myself, that highest, just strongest, most embodied version of myself. I could see it. And, you know, I thought that magically after running that marathon, I would just be like a changed woman and free, you know, I mean, I thought it happened like that. And it took a full almost year for it to fully integrate that experience for me. But I taught myself, like, I'm going to be okay. Like, I can take care of myself no matter what happens. Like, I had to learn that about myself to be able to step in to my power. And I think that that's what tests do in your life. I mean, grit, like if you have grit, you can have anything. You can truly have and attain anything. But there is a quiet confidence that comes with that when you've been tested and tested and tested. I mean, it's a inner security within yourself that you don't get from anything external, because you've been through hell and back, you know. And so that was my process. And then I think with the softness and the feminine, it's been the reawakening of the divine feminine over the last few years. I mean, we've seen what women have done and using their voices, you know, over the last few years. My throat chakra was so blocked for so long. But this year, it just was this invitation that it's like the world needs your voice, you know, and we all, you know, the divine feminine just isn't for women. I mean, no.
It's rubbed off on my husband.
Yes.
And I love who he is.
Yes.
By
That's
just
big.
Embracing that softer,
Yes.
again, not soft as in weak people who are listening and seeing my face. It is just, it's the ability to melt, to dissolve, to be a part of your surroundings and energetically,
Yes.
like again, you're not losing your identity. I know people want to sit there and say, I hate that. It's allowing your body to be malleable and
Yes.
and the way you talk and are open to ideas. I think that's why women, you know, when you think about them all in a circle, you know, we were from cave woman times, we've always been this group of women around waiting for the men to come back. And then what happens is we take that nurturing energy we built in that circle and we give it back to, quote unquote, our men.
Yes.
Now we've got gender fluidity. We have more acceptance that men can be in the circle with us.
Yes. Yes.
So talk to me about your husband, how he's changed you, how you've changed him.
He has been the greatest teacher in my life. Our birthdays are 2 days apart. I mean, he truly was a twin flame. I mean, if you look at even like our baby photos, like we look similar, but he's the strongest man I've ever known in my life too. And he's been my mirror in every single way, where he has really empowered me. And he's made me see, you know, things about myself that I would never be able to see without him. And he's in business, he's an entrepreneur, and his job is just, he brings out the best in people, and it can be painful. And I mean, he's direct. I mean, he is like, if you knew our personalities, we're opposites, complete
we are too.
Opposites. Yes. And I struggled with it for a very long time, you know, learning that dynamic. But he has made me who I am, honestly, from a business standpoint. He's really helped to strengthen me, and he's supported me because he realizes that my work is a soul assignment, you know, and he's just like, do your thing. This is your passion. This is what you're supposed to be doing here on earth. And he's supported that. And, you know, that is the empowered masculine energy, you know, when you can be totally secure and being in a relationship with a strong woman, you know.
I love that. And I, you know, as corny as it sounds, I'm going to make a Twilight reference here. They use this term, and it's the first time that I ever really understood what imprinting means. And I always can tell when someone has found a really good mate, because it's almost as if they've imprinted on you. And I can, and again, sounds corny, but you can I almost feel like as soon as I saw Ross, I'd be like, oh, I know you.
Yeah.
Because it's like when you give your husband a kiss goodbye and your perfume presses up against his skin, and like you're on him, you're imprinted on him, even if it's just scent.
Yes.
And I've always thought it's, I don't know. I've always I've always got a little upset with like all the songs about breakups and I smell her perfume on you and all that stuff. And I'm like, no, I want the imagery of when like my touch is left with my husband or his lips are on my cheek, that he's with me and he's integrated in with me.
Yeah.
Because you can feel it.
Yeah.
And it's a great feeling when you don't feel, even if you're opposite, there's the meridian lines that connect you. I think the metaphorical meridian energy line.
Yeah.
It's
yeah,
crazy.
and it's been fun. I mean, because he's very 3D as far as like very in this earth and very grounded. And I mean, I am obviously very, spiritual and esoteric, and it is a good balance. But it's a place where we have those differences, but we can have the conversation. You know? So it's beautiful, the unfolding with that.
I think that is so cool.
Yeah.
Well, as we start to wrap up this conversation, which I never want it to end, I really, it's funny. In the best way, one of my favorite fairy tales is Alice in Wonderland or Alice Through the Looking Glass. And when I have conversations like this one, it's like going down a really soulful rabbit hole of like, I see you, lady. Like, I see you. And there's so many different things that I'm so curious about, and I want to learn more, and I want to befriend you. So I mean, it sounds, I feel a little bit weird being like, can we be friends? But it's kind of great when you just feel like, I see you, and I know. So
sisters.
What am I, right? Totally. And then my last question, I've been asking it a lot lately because I like to open my mind up to other things, and I think about dinners, and I think about intimacy and knowledge and connection being shared. And I'm going to ask you, if you are going to have dinner with someone, 3, dead or alive, and where would you have this dinner? Anywhere in the world. And if you cooked it, what are you going to make if you're going to be served? But talk to me about the 3 people who would be your guests, and then talk to me about the nourishment and the surroundings.
Oh, that's so big. Thank you for this question. I mean...
And I know it changes all the time. Like one day we're like, I could have asked, but today.
Yeah. I mean, it would be somewhere in France.
Yeah, you're like me. I'm a Paris girl.
Yeah,
all the
so
way.
I am too. Yeah. My brother lives in Paris, and I've just been really blessed to be able to go see them. And that culture is so feminine too, the energy there. And so maybe in Provence with the lavender fields, you know, and just in some like sweet little home that was built, 500 years ago. And I'd actually like to be making the food with everyone, so I don't know what we'd have on the menu, but learning how to cook. I would say definitely Barack Obama would be one of those. Yeah. I just think that he is so wise and filled with dignity and class and youthfulness and energy. And I loved Michelle's book. I mean, I'd love to have her there too. I mean, I really appreciated her after I read her book.
She can be his +1.
Yeah, there you go. Yes. I just have always been fascinated with him, but then I took my appreciation for them to the next level when I read her book. So that is a good one. JFK. Yeah. So I'm going like kind of presidential over here.
But I think it's appropriate during these times.
Yeah. Because just being such a visionary. Yeah. And I have a pull to the 60s too. And just with all the changes, all of it, even after he was gone, with his brother and all the racial changes that happened in the 60s. So that would be one. And maybe the women that came before me and my family. Yeah. So these would be +1s and like to infinity.
Totally.
But just my ancestors and just knowing them, like truly knowing them, or seeing my grandma when she's like a young girl, and I mean, she was just one of the most special women in my life and very formative for who I am now. But like, I want to know her, and, so I would say the women that came before me, because I feel like they had a lot of intuition and a lot of hopes for, who they would be bestowing their genes down to. And so I would just want to have a conversation.
Look at you honoring the history again. There's definitely, we'll have to talk about on your next podcast, because I think it's so interesting when, I don't believe we should dwell in the past, but I do believe it serves its purpose.
Yes.
And I do believe that it's important to document the lives of people that have lived, because people do incredible things. And we get down to a footnote in a book, and there's so many things that they've experienced. And I do believe that we have the DNA of our ancestors in us.
Yes. Yeah.
So, when we talk about the ayahuasca next time, or we go down that conversation, you'll have to speak to just feeling your ancestors in your life, and past lives and all of that great stuff.
Yes. I'm just about legacy, and it's just, every life is so precious, and so it's just, is your energy supporting your legacy, and it's about alignment. I mean, true alignment. And this is the year for, that invitation.
I agree. Well, it has been probably one of, I don't think I've ever said this before. This has probably been one of my favorite conversations.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
I felt so relaxed. It felt like a good exchange of energy. And frankly, for those of you listening, if you're in your car, I mean, how soothing is her voice? And then I think about, like, if you're at home, just listening to it again, because there's so many good little nuggets in here, and having a little bit of tea and just kind of just listening to two women chat. It's like, it's talk about ASMR. That's the kind of ASMR I want, right? I know,
big.
right? It's crazy. So to the people who are listening and watching, where can they find you? On social media and your practice?
Yes. So our practice is called Sacred Chiropractic and Acupuncture. It's sacredchiropractic.com. We are on Instagram at Sacred Chiropractic, and I have a personal at dr.abbyreed. I have a podcast called Fiercely Feminine that's about reawakening the divine feminine and feng shui and slow beauty that you can find on most podcast platforms as well.
I love it. Yeah. Well, I'm super excited. And before I forget, before I head on out, there's a podcast that I think we launched last week with Kara Quigley.
Oh, I don't know.
That I think you would really like her.
Okay,
She's another one who is all about the feminine, and she's got an interesting story. So I would love to. I'd love to have her talk to you. And
beautiful,
perfect for your podcast. And I'll hop on there with her, because I love her. She's so much fun. As I invite myself onto your podcast.
You
but
are always
so
yes,
good.
I would love that.
Enjoyed it. Well. Thanks for listening. And please, if you liked this, that's the thing about podcasts, is you got to subscribe to see it come up in your feed more. So please subscribe, please like, please check out Dr. Abby Reed's podcast, and keep the mind open, because there's so many incredible things in this world to experience. And on that note, we'll see you later. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.